viewing on the cable channel as well as on YouTube, on the Lunenburg Public Access channel. The only communication that I have is something that you all probably have received by now, and that was the invitation to the volunteer appreciation reception at the Eagle House. If you did not receive one, you will.
Came through today.
But there was a save the date, and if you're on enough committees, then you end up with several invitations.
How is that how that works?
It does. So it's Thursday, September 19th from 6 to 8, and that would not be a night that meets.
That's correct.
It's not.
So, because we would be meeting on September 12th. So, anyway, that will be happening, and they're just looking for our SVP by September 12th. And with that, is there any communication from anybody on the committee? Any public comment from anybody on the committee?
Okay. Hold up public comment for just a second. As you know, I usually attend most Board of Selectmen's meetings, and this Tuesday night they were discussing the solar project on Electric Avenue and having initial discussions about the pilot that's proposed. Excuse me. It was more an informational meeting than anything else, but I think it's worth following for a little bit further into this process. I'm a little concerned about the due diligence before the town goes into an agreement with this, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay, and I'm going to assume that that refers to the assessor's office and the numbers of the pilot versus the tax revenue.
The tax
Okay.
revenue, right.
Okay.
Right.
Public comment from the public.
Rhonda Licio, 181 Reservoir Road. I watched the last school committee meeting, which was a workshop. They expressed the desire to focus more on student achievement. They also spoke about how much of their meeting time has been spent on things such as sports and extracurricular activities. At the end of the meeting, the Finance Committee liaison to the school committee made a public comment. He did not disclose whether his comments were being made as the liaison or as a member of the public. The comments he made seemed to indicate he was speaking as both. At first, he appeared to be speaking as a member of the public and a parent. He spoke of the need to reduce the burden of a free and public education, specifically the student user fees. He then proceeded to read his list of the cost of a free and public education to the Beardmore family for the upcoming school year. He projected the end-of-year total cost to be $1,200. Next, he appeared to be speaking as a Finance Committee member when he stated, and I will quote him, "We're going to have a lot of discussions, I think, this year about the burdens the school department puts on the town as a whole in different demographic groups within the town as part of this discussion we are hopefully going to have in October. I question whether it is appropriate for a member of the Finance Committee to spearhead a movement to reduce student user fees. Ultimately, any reduction in fees would shift a financial burden directly from this member to the taxpayers. It gives the appearance a position is being used for one's personal financial gain. What happens if he continues to pressure the school committee to reduce fees and succeeds? I guess the level of detail he has provided regarding his personal fees and his pledge to continue to provide such information will at least make it possible to calculate the exact dollar amount of his personal financial gain. It appears to me the lines and boundaries of the liaison position are being blurred and possibly crossed. I also question why the member would pursue a topic the school committee had clearly stated during the meeting it had been spending too much time on. And could we please allow them to focus on student achievement and agree that that is where the focus should be? Thank you.
Yes or no?
Yeah, I'll respond. The video is online of my public comment. It speaks for itself. The background predates my time on the Finance Committee when I spoke about a fee adjustment for low-income families that the school committee made as part of a policy decision back in the April or May timeframe. And the comment that I made at the time was that next year I'm going to keep a log of all of the fees and contributions that I'm asked to make relative to my children as participants, as students in the public school system. Because I believe that there's a dichotomy between what a free and public education is, or should be, and what parents in particular are asked to contribute to that free and public education of their children. Let me finish.
Okay.
I was speaking as a parent. I identified myself by name and I think by address, although now that I think about it, I'm not sure I did by address that evening. But if there was any ambiguity as to the role that I was taking, I certainly did not identify myself that evening as a Finance Committee member. The night that I was appointed as a liaison to the school board, I made my position known to this board, that I intended to continue to be vocal as a parent and as a citizen about policy-related matters in front of the school committee, and that we mutually agreed that the role of the liaison is really to bring information back from that board to the committee, and not to speak ever on behalf of the committee unless it's been planned and approved in advance, and in most cases that would be done by the chairperson when necessary. So my comment speaks for itself. I'm sorry that there's at least one member of the community that disagrees, but I stand by my comment, and I will continue to stand by it. And you know, if this needs to be taken further, I'd be happy to defend my position with the ethics board and the Attorney General's office.
No, I think it's fine. I mean, basically, the liaison position is, thank you for the clarification. I did not see the meeting, and basically, I'm comfortable with, if not representing the Finance Committee and you're representing yourself as a citizen, yeah, I'm not going to say don't go and represent yourself as a citizen. I will say that the safest thing to do at all is if you are on any committee in town and you go to another committee to speak, typically you'll hear people say, yes, I'm speaking as a citizen, just to clarify that you're not speaking on behalf of a committee, and I think that that's fine. I don't have a problem with that, and I certainly understand that there's fees for everything that are going up all over town, so I'm not going to get into the specifics of that. But thank you for your comment, thank you for your response, thank you for the clarification.
And you know, frankly, I just, if I could add one more thing,
Sure.
I do take the commenter's point, and frankly, as I think about it, and I hadn't thought about it until tonight, there is a blurring of the lines here, but I also represent myself as a citizen on the Finance Committee.
Yes.
And my view as a Finance Committee member, as we approach this process of looking at the budget in its totality and hopefully getting to a point where we can make some strategic decisions about how the school department is funded, and I'm speaking purely at a top level, certainly not about the administration of fees, I do believe that the burdens on families is much greater than is given credit for or paid attention to by a number of people in town. And I hope to continue to highlight those burdens, certainly relative to other demographic groups. Because I think, the demographics in this town are shifting, but, it's very important that we educate our kids in as public a way as possible and provide for them the best opportunities that we can as a town and as a school district.
Okay. Thank you. Any other public comment? Any other comment? Okay.
Hi, I'm Matt Allison, I'm Chair of the Planning Board. We are in discussions about actually going through with creating the Economic Development Committee. we are approaching discussions on creating a subcommittee for master planning, and we are starting to discuss master plan. So these things, I think all three would be greatly benefited by the input or the discussions with this group.
All right, so basically, are you looking for, as you start your discussions or your hearings and things, that you're looking for us to come to your...
I wanted to make you guys aware of it.
Okay.
And that's basically it. And I think that when we get to it, we'll have discussions about who we reach out to
Sure.
specifically, officially. But
Yeah.
I just wanted to bring that to everybody's attention.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Could I ask a question? Sure. Do you have a timeline, Matt, in terms of how this is going to come together over the course of the next several months, or an expectation?
I think it's a 2-year process that you were...
I try not to have expectations.
Okay.
I want to say, because basically when in the budget for the consult fees for the
I know,
master
yeah.
planning, I think it's over 2 years, so...
I should clarify.
Yeah.
You've gone out to bid or done an RFP, I believe.
Yeah,
for
we're
the
looking for
consulting
grant.
portion for this half.
Yep.
Is that anticipated to take us to next town meeting, or is this a finite amount of work that you would expect to have wrapped up in a couple of months?
We got a $50,000 appointment through capital planning, and we're seeking a grant to match that. And that probably will not cover the total cost of consultant, so to speak. There's been discussion about doing some of it, trying to do some of it on our own, and again, we're going to try to form a subcommittee specifically for master planning. But I just wanted to keep everybody in the loop, and I'm sure it's going to have some significant impacts on finance.
Oh, yeah.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions?
Okay. On to the next agenda item, which was the joint meeting presentation follow-up. I did send out an email that you all received to follow up the initial email that I had sent out. This one I sent particular to the department heads of the people we were hoping to hear from. I understand that there haven't been meetings from different committees, and I don't know if I should formally request that somehow it gets put on an agenda at the planning board to say yay or nay, you think it's a silly idea, or it sounds good to you. So, but basically, I haven't heard, I have heard back from the Board of Selectmen that they're very interested in seeing it move forward, which was what was expressed that night. So I basically just need to get a little bit more information on that. And then as a follow-up to that, the other thing that I did was sent out an email to the department heads, inviting them to attend anytime in the next several months, that we plan on meeting second and fourth Thursdays. They're welcome at their convenience or availability to ask us to put them on the agenda for an informal discussion, much like we had several years ago, which 3 of them should remember, because we made them do it back when I was new. So that's just a follow-up on that. Is there any questions on that at all?
Excuse me. Have we gotten any further on clarification from the school district as to what their understanding of what we're looking to do is? There was some question the last couple of meetings as to what their response meant.
Right, I wrote back to Heather, and I haven't heard anything back again, but I know that she waits until she meets with the committee to discuss it, so there's nothing more back.
Okay.
But basically, we'll just wait and see what happens.
I think as the wheels in the calendar, or the clock in the calendar are moving here, and we've been discussing this now for 3 or 4 meetings. We've been discussing it probably half as long as the time that we have to the actual meeting itself.
Yep.
I'm getting concerned about a date specific, and
Yeah, I think-
availability of the auditorium and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I'll send a request directly to Dr. Burnham. And then I know that Adam's on vacation this week. I believe Adam's on vacation this week, so I didn't expect to hear back from him, but I think that would be an important piece. So,
Can we specifically ask about those 2 Thursdays that you mentioned about the auditorium and try to pin that down now,
Sure.
even if we have to shift it, but at least.
Actually, what I might do is just ask for any Thursday in October, because basically if you folks are willing to, like meet on an off night, then we could do
I
that.
have at least one conflict, but I will apprise you of that because I don't have my work calendar with me.
Okay. Then I'll do that, and then basically if there's other nights during the week that we can consider, maybe you can let me know that too. Actually, if you could, within the next week, take a look at October and let me know if there's nights that work well for you, so I can send those dates over to Dr. Burnham and ask if the auditorium would be available any of those nights. And actually, I think I'm going to take things out of order a little bit. There were 2 things that came up this week that look like we have not received a formal request to identify anybody for either of these committees. One was that I alerted you to was the Building Design Committee for the Passios. When I was watching the meeting, they did indicate they wanted a member of the Finance Committee on it, but I did not receive a formal request to assign somebody. But I did want to at least be ready when they did. The other discussion that happened at the Board of Selectmen meeting this week was on the Level Service Committee, which I can't remember what the heck they called it. They called it...
Weird name.
It was a very weird name, but I believe... Minimum spending something. And I think what they were going for was the Service Level Committee, because he talked about having had it before. And when it was held before, it was a Service Level Committee. So, and they will be looking for someone from Finance for that as well. And that one was really to go at, if I remember correctly, because they didn't have it, the very year I started was the year they got rid of it, because I was originally assigned to it, but I never had to go to a meeting. So it was really to be able to get a handle on what direction departments were talking about in terms of staffing and how they were identifying staffing needs, and just really having enough discussion with department heads. And I think, and it wasn't all the department heads, but it was like Heather and Kate, and I don't know if there was anybody else, but just to get a sense of there being discussion of those items within committees that might have an interest in knowing what's going on before the budget comes to us, so that there's no surprises.
Quick question.
Sure.
I was not paying close attention to the selectmen's meeting when that was on, when that discussion came up.
Right.
But my recollection of the discussion was that it was not contained specifically to staffing, but there was also a financial component of that. And my reason for bringing it up, and I don't have a strong opinion on this, is does this require a subcommittee, or is this clearly within the domain of the Finance Committee to administer and oversee those, and facilitate those discussions with the cooperation of the town manager?
I think no, and the reason why I think no is, to me, and again, this is going on something that was not clearly presented.
Right.
And my recollection of what the intention was initially, so I don't know how it will be presented, but it was really more to have a sense of what's the Board of Selectmen looking for priorities? What's the schools looking for priorities? What are we expecting to see when people come before us in terms of what people are identifying as priorities? And so that, so the position came up for the HR director for the town side. Mm-hmm. If that had been discussed earlier in the year or earlier in the process, there seemed to be some contention that could have been avoided. Or if there were, so it's basically just to have a no surprises discussion going on so that everybody's rowing in the same direction.
So I think I'm very encouraged by the fact that we're all at least the members of this committee, based on the discussions that we've had over the course of the last several meetings about bringing department heads in advance of the budget discussion and that sort of thing, seem to be thinking about this within the same point, a similar point of view to Mr. Alonso at least.
Yes.
In terms of the need to do this. I'm a little bit concerned that we're going to be redundant in our efforts.
That's a
And
risk.
I think that it may be worth a chairperson to chairperson discussion, just to achieve some clarity in terms of who's going to tackle what this year.
Okay.
And again, my personal position at this point, keep an open mind, is we ought to facilitate that discussion as a finance committee. I'm not sure that a separate appointed special committee is necessary to do this.
Yeah, I think all right, we will certainly have that discussion, but I think that there's no decisions made by the ad hoc committee. I think that the whole purpose was just to make sure that there's communication going on that is between committees and between the departments, so that there's nobody who's left behind or out of the discussion. But I don't know, and it may be a fool's errand, I don't know, but I will raise your questions with Tom to see exactly. But this also may go back to when I originally sent the question to them on behalf of the Finance Committee saying, can we bring the service level committee back? Can we
Could be a
have regularly scheduled department head committee meetings, so all the committees are in the same, room, so we can find out what it is that people are working on, whether it's bi-monthly, like every 2 months or whatever, something to improve communication. So I'm not sure if that might be what tickled the thought. And if that's what tickled the thought, then to me, it would be just making sure that there's nobody who we come to the budget presentation and somebody on the Board of Selectmen says, well, that's not on my priority list. And it's like, well, it would have been special if that had been discussed because basically as far as, and maybe it's a Finance Committee role, and maybe that's my bias in the Finance Committee role is, I don't believe the Finance Committee sets the priority. I believe the town does. And I think that basically our job is to say, financially, you can do that. But I don't know what it means down the road is this. So, or if you want to pay for this, that means that you have to give up this. So that's how I see our role in it. In terms of who's setting the priorities, I see the school committee and I see the Board of Selectmen identifying, what they believe the priorities are, and I see our role is saying, okay, well, you have conflicting priorities, or you have duplicate priorities, and maybe there's a way to save money by combining roles or whatever. But that's just me. But I will take your question. I do take your point. But going to the first assignment, again, I did have one person express interest in participating in the building design. Nobody else did express an interest, but I didn't know if there was any, so I will open that up. The building design committee was, I believe, to look at what would be required in the Passios to accommodate all of the departments or people or uses that they were anticipating could happen there. So.
That was the issue that the Board of Selectmen were having a little bit of a problem as to what to call it, because it's not, initially, it's not truly going to be a building committee as much as it's going to be a committee that sifts through the information that comes from the design and study that's been funded to bring it to the next step and bring it to town meeting with a full design. And then if that's accepted, and that's all, if things get accepted, then probably that committee would roll into a full building committee responsibility for the actual project. There is no project at this point. All there is a study being done as to how much it'll cost and what it will look like, so we can bring real numbers to town meeting.
Right.
That was the gist of it.
Right, and the other part of the discussion was whether or not they wanted somebody from Finance Committee or School Committee.
That went back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and unfortunately, the charter is, or is it bylaw? I think it's a bylaw. I don't think it's a charter section, is a little bit vague as to the components of the committee And one position, at the beginning, I think it said there are 7 positions, but it only names 6.
Right, so they had an option with who they were going to appoint as the
Well,
seventh.
they took it as an option, but I'm not so sure who had the authority to
Well, I think,
decide on those options. The other thing is that the 2 positions that they've decided are select board positions, which they gave up one of them for school committee. My interpretation of the reading of the bylaw really requires that those 2 positions be the parties within the town government that have control of the building, that's a facilities building. So it's either my feeling, my personal feeling, that's the town manager or head of facilities or the DPW. I question their interpretation of who's supposed to fill those 2 positions, but I won't argue it. I mean,
okay.
it'll go one way or another, and, hopefully everybody will be represented.
I think it's ultimately their prerogative.
I think that's probably right, because I think basically the building is under the purview of the Board of Selectmen.
It is.
So,
But decisions made about, well,
but they're also not making decisions, they're basically coming up with basically, they don't even call it a committee yet, so.
Right, but I believe if you read in the charter, the town manager has control of facilities.
Right, and I believe that the town manager and the DPW director were supposed to be staff to the committee. I believe they were setting it up that way.
Yeah.
And probably John Londa as well. Just-
Oh, yeah,
just-
as
yeah.
additional liaisons or whatever. you
Right,
wanna
right,
call
right,
them.
right. Yeah, I think that they
no,
were
I don't-
probably
I
going to
don't
have those
disagree with
people
that.
as staff to the committee, but the
Yeah.
committee itself was going to be made up of members of other committees, so.
And they did talk a lot about,
Sure.
they could, if they chose to, increase the committee to 9 people
Yeah,
and so on and so forth. So it was a lengthy conversation, very similar to the discussion, and I always bring this up, of the planning board trying to figure out how big a flock of chickens is in town of Lunenburg under usage.
So
uses.
what is the anticipated outcome of this committee as you, because there's a budget, I mean, we allocated dollars to this as I recall.
only
from town meeting.
to the writing up, basically to the design of the building. So this group, I believe, is to look at who wants in to the building, and can they be accommodated, and how can they be accommodated, and then turn it over to the architect for design,
Not to oversee the design.
not to oversee the design.
Okay, I didn't understand that.
Basically develop the needs and then let the architect, that, I agree with your interpretation. I don't want to try to repeat it in another set of words. And then I'm assuming that that committee will be spearheading anything that comes out of that goes to town meeting, I would assume.
I would stay as far away from assuming anything as I possibly could.
Yeah.
But I will say, okay, so as of right now, Dave did express an interest in participating in that. So if anybody else has an interest in participating, you can, like, certainly let me know now, but otherwise, I'm just inclined to, if I'm asked to come up with a name, to submit Dave's.
And I want to be
You're
clear
just-
that
Okay.
I don't go into this with any preconceived notions as to which direction it should go. I'm sure people are saying, he's a Passios, he wants it to go the route it's headed as far as the Board of Selectmen is concerned. I still have some reservations. I need to see the numbers just like everybody else does. And if I see something better for the town, I'm going to try to help the committee go in that direction.
Okay, and then basically also, he will be representing the Finance Committee on this, so we will be, expecting to hear back from and relay information back through him in terms of, so to the extent that you're following any discussion on this, I have, again, they haven't set the group up, so we'll see what happens when they do. Now, in terms of the Service Level Committee, I will wait until there's a discussion with the chairs, just to see what's going on. But is there anybody who, given, if it's what I said it is, or think it is there anyone interested in participating?
Definitely.
Okay.
And I would second her nomination. I'm almost tapped out. so-
Have they formally asked for that as well, or?
They have not formally
Okay.
asked for it, but at the Board of Selectmen meeting this week, they expressed.
Yeah, I saw the
they said
discussion,
they were
yeah.
going to do
Yeah.
it.
So we could anticipate that?
I'm going to anticipate that it's coming. If it does come, I just want to be prepared.
So would you like a motion to
I would
that?
like a motion.
I would move that we appoint Michelle to the service level,
Or whatever it is. The
or whatever it
it's
is.
called, committee.
Soon to be
Minimum-
appointed committee.
Minimum spending.
Soon to be appointed committee.
And my second covers that
Okay, all in favor?
motion.
Aye.
Okay, do I have a motion then to appoint Dave to the Building Design Committee for the Patios?
So moved.
Do I have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Oh, that's so nice, okay. Thank you. Do we have any committee or department updates?
Yes, there was a school committee meeting last week, as was discussed during public comment. The school committee, it's my understanding, does a annual workshop with a representative from the Massachusetts Association of School Committees to go through the process of analyzing how things have gone as a committee over the course of the last year, areas that they want to focus on for goal setting and how they go about running their operating principles over the course of the year. And so they had a workshop to discuss those goals. And the commenter during public comment painted a very accurate picture that the school committee collectively indicated that they would like to focus more on student outcomes in the coming year and what happens during the day and instruction in particular versus the amount of time that they have to spend dealing with policy-related issues that happens outside of the school day, dealing with sports or busing or a whole sort of issues that have occurred in particular over the course of the last year. There wasn't a document to come out of it or anything, and it was about a 2-hour workshop that they went through. It was an interesting discussion. I was very encouraged by some of the things that came out of it. I think our school department is in good hands. That's about it. Aside from the issue of my public comment, that was about the meeting. There were no substantial budget-related items that were discussed.
Okay. Actually, oh, I'm sorry, did you have a?
Yeah, I've just got one more add-on to what transpired at the Board of Selectmen's meeting Tuesday evening. And I'll only just briefly mention it because I'm sure the finance director will give us a full rundown at some point. But she did give a presentation on the closeout of the fiscal year. So far, I don't think it's all finalized, but it's pretty much finalized. Gave a number of numbers as to where there were surpluses in accounts and so on and so forth, and there was some discussion around that. One of the numbers that did come out was that it appears, and this is not certified, that free cash will be approximately $1 million. And as of right now, there's no number on new growth.
Okay, thanks. No others, then I'm gonna go back because I skipped right over the discussion of goals.
Well, funny thing about goals, no one actually got back to me, so I'm wondering if it's even a priority for the group. Because when I made my comment, the request was we consider making goals, not that we have to. And with the lack of interest, maybe we just don't need to. We do have a lot going on right now. There's things I want to accomplish, but that's me.
Okay, I'm gonna take a guess, and I could be completely wrong, because I just said we should never assume. But I thought that your list was perfect. And I thought that that would be something reasonable to work towards, and I don't know if others felt the same way.
I honestly need to go back and review it. I have a couple of things in the back of my mind that I'm, in a private conversation, have mentioned that I'm struggling with how to approach it at this point. I should probably have the conversation with you also, Michelle, and see if it's appropriate to roll it into that type of a format or not. That's where I'm at.
So I think that there are two issues that come first and foremost to my mind in terms of goals that I articulated at the last meeting. And I'm almost wondering if we need a comprehensive list that we stamp on time, date specific, or...
And see, that's exactly what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
That's why I brought it up, because I've heard a lot of ideas, especially from the new members, and I don't want to lose them. And I'm afraid with the bigger issue going on, the bigger discussion going on, those things are going to get lost.
So I feel, though, that, you know, of the three major issues that I've taken to heart and really advocated for over the course of the past couple of months, we're in motion.
Yep.
Right? Certainly with respect to taking this, you know, totality future view and being strategic about how we're going to think about funding over the course of the next several years with this meeting and figuring out what the subsequent actions of that could or should be. I think we've got that in motion. I think it's probably worth, you know, at some point in time saying this is how we want this to go and put some words around it, but I think we're moving in the right direction. I do think that I don't think we need a glossary of terms. I think we need to specify 3 or 4 definitions around different service or funding levels that we can set expectations from department heads saying, this is a service level this is a service level or level services budget. This is a level funding budget. This is some sort of hybrid version of what that is. And we're looking for one of the 3 or 2 of the 3 or all of the 3 for purposes of discussion, but that the definitions are clear. That's my second item, and I think that is clearly worth an agenda item in the not too distant future for us to kind of hash out and maybe workshop or whatever's needed to do that. I can't remember what the third one was. Couldn't have been that important. I'm sure it was. But I feel as if we're moving in the right direction on some of these issues. Do we need to come up with 2 or 3 now? And timestamp them, you know, August 22nd, these were our goals for the next 6 months or a year or what have you, and then revisit it? Or do we need a comprehensive list of 3 or 4 or 5 goals that we want to agree to before, you know, the next meeting or something?
Well, I think that one of the ways to go is that if we at least have a list of, whether it's 3 to 5 things. Okay, so certainly, you know, fixing the committee page should be a I think that what I would do or offer to do is have as a standing agenda item each of those 5 things. So
Okay.
that if we're making progress or not making progress towards something, we know that it's going to be highlighted or brought up. We used to do that years ago. We had several things that we didn't want to lose sight of, so we put them on the agenda. So I think maybe if next meeting we come in with, this is what the list is that you understand it to be at that time, which ones do you guys want to go with? And then we'll just start putting it on as a standing item on the agenda.
So the ones that I talked about in the comment, most of them were mine, but 2 of them, and I'm just going to call you, I'm just going to pick on you. So Dave, you had talked several times about wanting to have a discussion about the fire department and that whole piece. And I don't want to speak for you if you really don't want to make that a goal.
No,
You know
go
what I'm
ahead.
trying to say?
Oh, he definitely does.
We'll have that discussion.
But see, that's one of those things that's come up and I don't want to lose sight of
We need
it.
to, you know, we put that down, but we need to, as you say, identify the actions and the desire for what we want for an outcome, or possible outcome.
Yeah.
Get that down and then see if it's really appropriate.
So we should have that discussion as a group then? Okay.
Right, and I think that part of that discussion or part of that outcome would be that when we have a meet and greet with that department head, that there's information that can be fleshed out at that time as well, so that all of the committee is participating.
The other thing that I've mentioned, I believe, a few times, and I have in the back of my mind, is that I think, based on last year's budget process, and I come back to the underground storage tanks again, that I hope that we as a committee push the mentality that projects be vetted fully before they get too far into the budget process. So they have an idea of what's possible, even if you don't know for sure, but what's possibly available for grant money and/or funding and/or maybe even earmarks. I had a conversation with Senator Dean Tran's administrative assistant last week, and she's very willing to give information as to the steps to approach that, what legwork needs to be done ahead of time for any particular project and this is more for individual committees, departments, or whatever.
Well, it's also very likely that the other thing that we can do as a committee is ask Heather, because basically all of those people come in to meet with Heather, and the departments are at that point identifying what their requests for earmarks are.
Right, but the departments aren't aware, or some of the commissions are not aware of what they need to have available to give to Heather for her to go for the earmark. It's not Heather pulls that information together necessarily, it's, what projects do they have in the pipeline that they think might be appropriate? And I agree, they go through Heather, and I told the assistant that it would still continue through Heather, but the
Right.
projects would start at the lower level in the commission and committees.
How does this evolve into a tangible finance committee goal? Like,
I'm not sure that it can, other than,
Well, that's what I said too, we talk about it and maybe it doesn't work.
I mean, a goal in my mind should be something that we can put a finished stamp on it at the end and it's measurable, right?
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely. So and I'm not saying this is something we're gonna do, but for that specific scenario, and I tried to allude to this before, I don't have any idea as to what the actual paper and pencil process is for getting the thoughts from the department head's head about the budget onto Heather's desk. So there's that whole process in between that I don't know anything about, it's like a black box. And that is where something like that could sit. Where in this process are they going to need to do that due diligence to make their budget request?
okay, actually, which leads me to the other thing that we have not done yet is Heather's presentation on the
Which is
budget
very
process.
related,
So basically, I think maybe identifying questions that we will have for that process, that would be helpful to let her know that that's one of the questions that's going to come up. I believe that this was the last meeting she was supposed to be missing this summer. And I believe when we talked about setting up the initial discussion on the budget, we were looking at September. So I will follow up with her on that and see when the initial discussion is, and that would be a really good time to bring that question forward.
and I suspect that there could be some goals that evolve
Come out of that.
discussion.
Right.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. And like I say, I throw these out on the table as not necessarily goals that we'll agree to try to accomplish, but it's information that might lead to some goals, as you just said.
Sure.
And right, it's just a matter of folding it all in. I feel it's great, we're all coming together, and there's a lot of new ideas floating around, but it's a matter of weaving them together into a whole that we can really work with.
Well, and also making sure that we've got I think there may be a semantic difference between goals and agenda. And
Yes.
that we have a clear agenda for the kinds of things that we want to address, attack, think about, hear about. Because I'm looking at the minutes from the meeting that you made that comment. And, you get stuff on here like evaluate staffing levels against industry standards. Well, you could do that once and call it a day. Or you could say, well, this is going to be part of our standard practice and policies for the coming years. And every year in October, we're going to have an agenda item, and there'll be some preparation and research that's going to bring that information to the table, and we'll talk about it. Cost-benefit analysis of salaries versus training versus outsourcing. I can't even imagine what a gigantic discussion that could potentially turn into.
Or
But
it
if we,
could just be a financial analysis, but it's a matter of doing it and getting the resources to do it.
and get it on the agenda and make sure
Right.
that somebody's prepared to come and talk about it in an informed manner.
Yep.
So maybe that's what we're scratching on here, right? Is an agenda for the year versus a list of goals that are measurable and finite.
Well, yes and no, because if we don't, in my mind, if we don't have a list of goals, we're then gonna go into this meeting with Heather to get the process, and we'll come out with a bunch of goals after that, and we'll have goals upon goals, and it will turn into a runaway train, where if
We don't want that.
Exactly, no, we really don't, and that's why I said, just to keep us on track, what we can accomplish this year, what we can accomplish next year. It's that whole, it's a discussion like that. So yes, I agree that agenda versus goal, that's a good discussion to have. Because an agenda can be like a mission statement, but I do think there are things that we can accomplish that I think would be worth putting as a goal to actually take care of.
Okay.
But again, the whole committee has to want to do that.
Yeah, as I'm looking at the list that you outlined that night 2 weeks ago, there are at least half a dozen items there that I feel like I need to learn about, just as a, member education kind of thing,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like, better understand the role of free cash, non-recurring revenue, underspending, this mechanism that we seem to have in the budget that, eludes me at this point, this whole underspending concept. We should take the time and put it on an agenda to make sure that those concepts are clear to us from the town manager and the town accountant, right?
Right.
Like, those are things that we should be doing, just so that we know what's going on.
Right, and so that's why I put it as a goal to make sure it happens.
Right.
That's exactly why.
Okay. Could you do me a favor?
Yep.
Can you do the agenda for the next meeting? And can you weave some discussion about the goals in there?
Okay.
And then when you're ready to send the agenda?
You want to look at it first?
No, I'll tell you where it goes. Or you can send it to me and I'll send it out, that's fine.
It's a big secret.
It's not a big secret,
I'm just kidding.
but you have to make sure it's in PDF format.
Seriously?
Seriously, it has to be in PDF format. Or I get yelled at. But anyway, yeah, because I think it's important, and I think it's important to separate out, okay, what will we carry as a regular item going forward, and what do we need to put on the agenda going forward, so that, yes, in October, we'll have Karen talk about free cash.
Right.
And underspending, and the fact that, yeah, they didn't fill some positions, so, yeah, that happened. And basically, it would also be good to hear from Heather. So when Heather replaced Kerry as town manager, she changed the way free cash was used in order to accommodate capital expenditure. And it was actually, the other thing that ended up doing was freeing up more funding for operating budget by using it in a more planful way.
And
for the-
as non-recurring revenue, that was the best way to use it.
Right. So, so it would probably also be good to have her talk about how she came to that as a way of doing, I mean, it took me 2 years to get my head around what it was that she was doing, because it just didn't make sense to me, because Carrie had done it differently, so. But it was basically one of the reasons why we didn't have to take out a loan for a fire truck, so.
As you say that, I would just like to make one brief comment. that
Sure.
I'd like us to get back to over the long term, and that is our debt policy. We brushed over it very quickly in meetings that we were not all necessarily there for.
Right.
And so I'd like to get back to that, but we've got a heavy schedule already going into budget season, so I'm not looking to press that into this time frame
Yeah. and-
down the road somewhere.
I think, it'll be an interesting discussion. So I think, Yeah, because even as, from my own perspective, I changed my mind in terms of the best way to go with it, so, but yes, I think everybody should be here, and it would also be really special that if there's anybody out there that would be interested in the empty seat for the Finance Committee, that we do still have a vacancy, and would welcome anyone to put in a talent bank form. We don't have a town manager or financial officer to report, but we do have minutes. So did people have a chance to read the minutes?
Yes.
Yep. I have printed copies if anybody would like them.
I read them, but I wasn't here and I didn't watch it.
Okay.
It was good. You just don't know what you're
I just
missing.
You should go
couldn't
back
remember
and
the
watch
date,
the
but I
tape.
move that we accept the minutes of
August 8th.
August 8th, as written.
Do I have- Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. The next meetings we have are September 12th and September 26th. So September 12th, you'll do the agenda for. And actually, so if you want to get in touch with Heather and see if she could be prepared to discuss the budget process, have that initial discussion. And then we'll do the goal discussion after that.
I'm sorry, I just was reading something and not listening. You're proposing Heather do that presentation on the 12th? Is that what you're leaning toward?
That's what I'm leaning towards.
Okay.
Yeah, and then basically, because if there is if there is a chance that there's going to be anything that's going to come out that's going to be, oh, maybe we should have a goal for that, then that would be good to have that as part of the discussion on the goals.
Yeah, I mean, I don't expect that presentation to be large. It's really just the step-by-step process of bringing a budget to Heather.
I expect there'll be a lot of back and forth, though, so that, it will last a little while, but
Yeah.
it'll be, I'm sure it'll be a good conversation and a good learning experience. I've been through a number of budget cycles, just watching from the floor, basically, and understand the way the process has been the last couple of years, but I don't know all the details of it, and I'm sure Heather will allude to much more than even I know about it at this point.
Yeah, I'm interested in primarily process is where, and I think that there'll be some very interesting things that come out of that we might not even anticipate right now. Also, I think the right word I'm looking for is methodology, right? In terms of determining priorities. Because ultimately, the role of the town manager is to make some of these judgment calls and recommendations and to bring them to the Finance Committee, the Board of Selectmen, and ultimately the town meeting. And that's where I begin to lose clarity, is what's the methodology in terms of developing those priorities and what gets funded over what? Is there a methodology, or is it squeaky wheel or some other method? I don't think it is, but I'd like to hear from her as to what that is, because it's not clear from casual observation.
So kind of like how she comes up with a proposed budget.
Yeah.
Yeah, and why are we, and that goes to the question of, why do we want paramedic status? So it's like.
Well, and I don't
and,
think it's
so-
necessary to go into the why we want paramedics.
No,
at
but
this
where did that
meeting,
come from?
but
Right, yeah.
Relative to other asks and priorities.
Sure,
right?
yeah, like, how did that become a priority?
Right.
So that's which is the question. So, and that's part of the methodology question, I think. All right, then, do we have any other comment or communication from anybody on the committee? No? Anybody from the public? So nice to see public. We always enjoy seeing public. All right, then with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you very much, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.
take that personally. You know, it's gonna sit down